It's me, and today, here's the theory for you, Time Travel Titanic! Together, let's go!
One silver lining to fewer movies coming out this year, a chance to theorize about some of the best classics of yesteryear. Take for instance, the hottest movie from when I was in middle school, Titanic. It's got everything you'd hope for in a summer blockbuster. Iconic lines, enduring
I'm the king of the world!
romance, time travel. Wait, time travel?
Time travel? What the?
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory!
Hello, Internet! Welcome to Film Theory! Hello! Hey.
The show where I'll never let go of theories about movies that were released before most of the people watching this video were born. It seems like every year I have a good excuse to use this tweet.
Can't do this anymore!
And hoo boy, was 2020 the peak year to exemplify that feeling. So
Yeah, case in point, this movie is very old. Man, I feel old, man.
instead, this holiday season, I wanted to take us all on a quick trip back in time to the year 1997. Things were just simpler back then. Games had just started breaking out into the third dimension.
Yeah, 25 years ago. 25 years ago. A quarter of a century.
It was literally impossible to be on the phone and on the internet at the same time, and there were only 3 Star Wars movies. It was also a time where I owned 0 pairs of jeans. It's not to say that jeans weren't commonly available, there was just a period of time in my life where I thought it was a good idea to wear suit pants. But anyway, it is hard to state how big of a movie James Cameron's Titanic was back in 1997. When this thing was released, Titanic was the most expensive movie ever made, but it also became the highest grossing movie ever made, being the first film to ever break the $1 billion earned at the box office mark. And remember, we're talking about 1997 money here.
Yes, back in the days, breaking 1 billion, that's unheard of, man.
And it stayed on top of that leaderboard until a different James Cameron movie about weird blue aliens came along to beat it. It has the record of being nominated for the most Oscars, winning the most Oscars. The theme song, My Heart'll Go On, was the most played song on the radio for 10 straight weeks, which honestly in my memory feels too low because you could not step into a circuit city in the late 90s and not hear that song. And even though Titanic runs at a hefty 3 hours and 14 minutes, which, fun fact, was a very specific time because it was the exact time it took the ship to sink in real life, it's also the digits of pi, people still went to see it in the theaters over and over and over again, even though there were no supervillains in it. Unless, of course, you count the iceberg, hashtag historical spoilers.
Thanos!
My point is that Titanic was a dominating cultural force, and I get that this channel tends to work best when I focus on animated stuff and superheroes, but man, this is a movie that we need to talk about. And it's not like I haven't been asked to either. I get a lot of requests to cover whether Leonardo DiCaprio's character of Jack could have fit on the floating rubble that saved his girlfriend Rose, but I've shied away from that theory because 1, Mythbusters already did a deep dive into the topic. I've watched enough episodes of Deadliest Catch to know that when you plunge yourself into cold water without a survival suit, you're gonna freeze to death pretty darn soon. But also number 2, the question is missing the point entirely. Jack had to die. Jack wanted to die because Jack is a time traveler. I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. Jack on the Titanic is a time traveler who was there on the boat to make sure that the Titanic sank. And if
Wait a minute, are you actually doing about... what, Matt, what? Bro, are you okay? Bro, are you okay? Bro.
you think that's a hot take, just you wait, because this episode is gonna get steamier than the window of Jack and Rose's makeout mobile. So put on your life jackets, theorists, because today we're plunging into the icy, iceberg-infested waters of Titanic's time travel.
Alright, let's keep this wholesome and positive, family friendly. Thank you so much.
Now, in order to follow this theory and several of the references I just made to Titanic, you need to have a good idea of how the movie goes. So here's a quick and spoiler-heavy recap for you. In the
I'm so sorry, the spoiler alert, my deepest apologies.
1990s, a team of scientists is excavating the wreckage of Titanic, a massive passenger ship which crashed 85 years before. During their search, they find an old, brand unsafe drawing of a lady named Rose wearing a necklace that contains a massive diamond named the Heart of the Ocean. And as luck would have it, she's still alive. alive and can tell him the story of the Titanic's cursed voyage. From there, most of the rest of the movie just boils down to Rose telling her tale, how she boarded the Titanic with her rich fiancé Cal, who is just the worst human being, and how, to get out of her miserable relationship, she decided to jump overboard to kill herself. However, as she's about to do it, she's spotted by Jack, a poor third-class passenger who's only on the Titanic because he won a ticket in a poker game. Jack is charming enough that it makes Rose not want to die, and it doesn't take long for her to realize that she likes Jack's nude illustrations and below-deck drinking parties a whole heck of a lot more than her fiancé's misogyny. Then the boat hits a huge ice cube and breaks in half. There aren't enough lifeboats for everybody, so Rose ends up floating on a piece of debris while Jack chills out in the water, literally. Turns out submerging yourself in icy water is bad for you, so Jack freezes to death while Rose is rescued when one of the lifeboats turns around and picks her up. At the end of her life, she dumps the heart of the ocean back into the sea because it's a symbol or something of her love of Jack. And then she dies because she real old. The end. Now, Titanic as a whole is an entertaining love story, and it has the added bonus of Leonardo DiCaprio chasing after a young woman, just like in his real life, only this time it's age appropriate. But what isn't as immediately apparent about this story is that Jack isn't just a poor third-class passenger. Jack is a time traveler specifically on the boat to complete a mission. Oh yeah, now we're getting into the crazy pills territory of this theory. But
Alright, okay, it's getting to the point which, bro, MatPat, bro, are you okay?
it's not crazy at all when you think about the things that Jack says that no one from 1912 could possibly know. Let's look at a few examples. As he's freezing to death in the North Atlantic, Jack accurately predicts Rose's fate.
You're gonna die an old lady, warm in her bed.
All right, that one's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. It's a last-minute pep talk as you're on the verge of death, no problem. But how about one of the very first things that Jack mentions to Rose when he discovers her dangling over the railing of the ship?
I remember when I was a kid, me and my father, we went ice fishing out on Lake Wissota.
Seems plausible enough, right? Nothing out of the ordinary there. Well, this conversation between Jack and Rose is happening in April of 1912, but Lake Wissota is a man-made lake which was created between 1915 and 1917. Even if Jack is lying about the memory, there's no way that he could know the name of a lake that didn't exist yet. And this also isn't the only time it happens. He does it again when he's telling Rose about their imaginary trip to the Santa Monica Pier.
We'll ride on the roller coaster till we throw up.
Not necessarily the most charming pitch for a date, but that's missing the point. He's referring to the Blue Streak Racer roller coaster, which wasn't on the Santa Monica Pier until 1917. And it's not just things that Jack says either. When he and Fabrizio are rushing to board the Titanic, we see Fabrizio carrying this bag. That bag is called a moose sack. And here's where I'll pause a moment to let you giggle about that, and also give you a moment to subscribe to the channel. Help push us over the 10 million subscriber mark. We good?
Thank you so much. Subscribe to my channel as well. Thank you.
Good. All right.
So
So
sorry.
that
Yep. So sorry. Subscribe. Thank you. I think I recently like what 900 plus subscribers. Going to be 1,000. Going to be 1,000 subscribers soon.
rucksack became popular after its initial use as a pack for the Swedish military in World War II, starting in 1939. Even if Jack had been guessing about future roller coasters and man-made lakes, how on earth does he have a physical item that wasn't produced until 27 years after he died? Unless he's hopping timelines. How does Jack have this power? Why would he go back in time? And the most important question of all, why did he choose that haircut if he was trying to blend into the scenery in 1912? Now, hold on! You stalwart advocates of Occam's razor are probably saying, isn't there a simpler explanation here? That Rose is just making Jack up? After all, as one of the researchers mentions to Rose at the end of the movie,
We never found anything on Jack. There's no record of him at all.
but as Rose says, there shouldn't be records of him because Jack never purchased his own ticket, which he didn't. He won them playing poker in a bar 5 minutes before the ship left. All the more reason the dude is a time traveler, leaves no trace of his existence, gets on the boat via a fluke chance of luck right before it takes off. And let's be honest, if Rose were making Jack up, who drew the sexy time picture of her that they found in the safe? He definitely existed, and he definitely is a time traveler. Heck, if you need further proof, look no further than the movie's director, James Cameron, writer and director of iconic science fiction films like Aliens, The Abyss, Avatar, Alita Battle Angel, mastermind behind other time travel classics like The Terminator and Terminator 2. Look at the dude's entire filmography. Everything is sci-fi and action. You know, the one movie that just doesn't make sense? Titanic, until you consider that it's low-key a sci-fi time travel movie. So
Get you get it? Loki.
Whether you buy into
With the time travel. Oh, I love the reference.
that or not, just go with me on this. Why? Why would a time traveler go back to the Titanic just to have a fling with this rich girl only to die in the end? And why wouldn't he choose to, I don't know, save the frickin' boat if he knew what was coming? Well, you see, one thing that's undeniable is that Jack saving Rose changes the course of history. If Jack doesn't see Rose stepping over the rail and she actually jumps, the Titanic doesn't sink. Consider this, once her fiance Cal or her mother notices that she's missing, they'd report it to the crew, at which point standard procedure is to turn the boat around and attempt a search and rescue. But the Titanic is a big ship that you can't just throw in reverse. So in order to go back and search for Rose, they'd likely need to make what's called a Williamson turn, which is a teardrop-shaped maneuver that large ships use to reverse course and requires a significant detour. And then there's the actual search. What matters here isn't whether the search and rescue is successful, what matters is the change of timing. Changing the course of the ship alone is time-consuming. The official inquiry into the crash found that it took over 30 seconds and nearly half a kilometer for the ship to turn 22.5 degrees in an attempt to avoid the iceberg. So doing a full 180-degree loop is gonna take several minutes. The ship then has to retrace its path back once they discover Rose is missing, and then there's the time of the actual search and rescue. It's impossible to come up with an exact figure of how much of a delay Rose jumping overboard would cause, but if we're considering the bare minimum of 15 minutes to turn the ship around and go back to the point of Rose's disappearance, a shockingly cursory 30-minute search, and then another 15 minutes to get back on course, we're looking at least an hour of delay, which again, realistically, I think it would have been much longer than that. Even 1 hour, though, changes history, because icebergs travel in the water on average about 0.7 kilometers every hour, and often faster than that depending on the current. So it's safe to say that the iceberg which sank the Titanic in real life would have been thousands of feet away if the Titanic had been delayed by an hour or more.
Wow, imagine if we hit that.
With no iceberg to hit, the ship now enters New York Harbor safely, and Rose's death ends up saving 1,500 lives. Suck on that butterfly effect, Ashton Kutcher. So then, Jack was real, but also a time traveler who saved Rose to make sure that 1,500 other innocent people would die? Why would he travel back in time to ensure the destruction of the boat rather than prevent it? Well, maybe it's not that simple. Maybe Jack Dawson was sacrificing the 1,500 lives lost on the Titanic to save 1,000,000 lives and preserve the course of history. Hear me out on this one. Let's say the Titanic hadn't sunk. Rose jumps overboard, the ship is delayed, it misses the iceberg, and the Titanic is now the new fad in transatlantic travel. It travels back and forth between New York and Southampton, carrying thousands and thousands of passengers until one day in 1914 or 1915, it's torpedoed and sunk by a German submarine, killing the thousands of people on board. Now, while that might seem like it's coming out of nowhere, like it is completely random, we actually have ourselves a historical comparison. In May of 1915, the British passenger ship Lusitania was sunk by a German U-boat, killing over 1,000 people, including 128 Americans. And the Lusitania was attacked just off the southern coast of Ireland, which is right on the route Titanic was taking between Southampton and New York. So we know that the German Navy would have been in the area with an opportunity to sink the Titanic. Now, in 1915, the United States was neutral in the recently started World War I, though they were helping to supply the British using ships like the Lusitania to do so. But Germany declared the waters around the United Kingdom and Ireland a war zone, and while it's speculation to say that they would have torpedoed the Titanic, let's just say that their history of being perfectly honorable in world wars wasn't exactly stellar. The sinking of the Lusitania raised anti-German sentiment among Americans, but the US still stayed out of the war until 1917 as part of a surge that ultimately won the war for the Allies. But if it had been the Titanic rather than the Lusitania, there would probably have been many more Americans on board. And if there were no war material on board, the unprovoked nature of the attack would have been too egregious for President Woodrow Wilson to keep the US out of the war. After all, history has shown us that American sentiment can turn to war when it perceives an unprovoked attack against the country, like Pearl Harbor, the sinking of the Maine, or entering the war in Iraq. So the Titanic sinking via iceberg kept us out of World War I, maybe. So what? Big deal. The US was instrumental in the Allied forces winning the war, so why would it matter? Well, it's true, the US was mostly successful in World War I, but most historians agree that joining World War I in its early stages, say 1914 or 1915, rather than when we actually entered in 1917, would have been disastrous for the United States. The standing army of the US in 1915 was smaller and less experienced than the forces from the major players in World War I, but also smaller and less experienced than the forces of Bulgaria and Greece. The main opponent of the United States in the war, Germany, had an army 20 times the size of the US's at that point. To position the United States as an international power, many American politicians led a campaign known as the Preparedness Movement in the early days of World War I to increase the size of the military, train them more thoroughly, and invest in updates to equipment and machinery. The gradual onset of this program proved useful for the US in the later days of the war, but if the US had entered the war in its early stages, it's likely the Preparedness Movement would have enacted their plan to draft 600,000 young men annually and send them to the front lines immediately, without adequate time to prepare them, proper equipment to send them to battle with, and only rudimentary scouting of the war front in Western Europe. American casualties likely would have skyrocketed. As World War I played out in history, the US lost approximately 116,000 men in the last stages of the war. If the US had joined earlier, though, with mobilized but untrained troops fighting in the trenches, it's likely that that number of casualties would have been closer to Austria-Hungary's 1.1 million deaths, France's 1.4 million, or Germany's whopping 2 million. Heck, the war may have even been lost, as American troops and supplies get burned out early rather than giving the Allied forces a late-game boost to carry them over the victory line. So let's take that all back to Titanic. Though Jack's decision to save Rose caused the Titanic to sink and cost 1,500 people their lives, he may have done it to save the United States from a timeline that would have cost them over 1 million lives. And with that kind of decimation, who knows how the US turns out for the remainder of the 20th century? Maybe Americans never land on the moon, never become world leaders in information technology, or worst of all, never develop the world's premier film market that can afford to fund a $200 million movie to give Leonardo DiCaprio his big break. That's right, friends. Leonardo DiCaprio's character is a time traveler who made sure the Titanic sinks to prevent an alternate history where the career of actor Leonardo DiCaprio never exists.
But having said that, I think that you are thinking too much into it, man. Bro, are you okay, man? I'm sorry, but...
But hey, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut.
Yeah, this theory is... It's too much, it's way overboard. Wow. Police box time travel. Anyways, thank you all so much for watching this video. I hope you find this video very unique and special to watch. Anyways, if you do like this video, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to my channel and comment down below if you have anything to share with us. Don't forget to follow our channel and sincerely appreciate all of the support and encouragement for my work. Thank you all so much for your best, and I hope to see you in my next video. It's very motivating and inspirational, encouraging to see all your wonderful, wholesome, positive comments in the comment section down below. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you all in my next video. But hey, that's just a theory, a film theory, and cut. Thank you. And I hope to see you all in my next video. Bye, subscribe. Thank you. Time travel, like seriously, bro, seriously. What's going on?